So I can only do 5 minutes at a time with this app, so bear with me. But what I was saying is that you've got all of these little tiny microorganisms that are able to create more soil substrate the further they help to break down the rock. So you've got all these little microorganisms breaking down this rock, creating more soil for more elevated and more complex organisms to take over, and eventually you're going to continue this whole process. So again, here is just another example. Here's another picture of succession. Primary succession usually happens in these first 3-4 steps. You've got this exposed rock, which again comes from volcano flows. Those are usually called pyroclastic flows, or you've got the recession of your glacier. So those glaciers are starting to melt and they're starting to say, hey, here we've got some rock, someone needs to take it over. These tiny little lichens and mosses are going to start the process. You've got these small herbs, small shrubs. Usually these are your annuals. So like your weeds and that kind of thing is going to take over first. And then it's going to, when they die, add into more of the nutrients, add some more soil, get that going. And then you've got more complex and more mature and larger plants are able to come into the process. So here's just some examples of some pioneer species. You've got lichens, which usually are going to take over, like I said, those pyroclastic flows, lava, that kind of thing. Your mosses, which usually are going to take over more moist locations. Lichens are going to be a little bit more dry areas, usually a little bit more tropical. Mosses are going to be your like your temperate zones that are going to be a little bit moister. Grasses, everywhere. They take over absolutely everything, but usually you're going to have a mix. Depending on where you are, your lichens and your grasses are going to be your most prevalent, but depending on how much moisture you have in the environment, you're also going to have your mosses. So you can see these little grass blades right here, but you can also see below it this tiny little, like, it looks kind of like moss, but this is actually your lichen. That's these guys. And here is, I know it's kind of hard to see. Let's just hide this. So once I stop moving the cursor, you can see right here your primary succession and your pioneer species. They're going to start with your bare rock, then go to your lichens, your small annual plants, and your lichens, and then your grasses and perennials. After your grasses and perennials really take hold, that's when you get into your intermediate species. So your pioneer organisms are only really going to be these three. Once they add in enough decay, once they add in enough soil substrate, then you're going to have more complex organisms come in. Notice there are no animals yet. We're only talking plants. So this is all leading to something called a climax community. So this is a stable, very mature community that undergoes very little or no succession. So very little or no change because it's set up. It's ready to go. If you go into a forest 20, 30, 50, 60, 100, 200 years later, that forest isn't really going to look much different. There are some trees that still are alive. The redwood forest has some of the longest living trees. They are hundreds of years old. Same thing with your desert. The Sonoran Desert in the Southwest Americas in the United States and a little bit of Mexico. That is usually the what you call it, like the textbook definition of a climax community. It doesn't change for hundreds and even thousands of years. This location has not changed. Grasslands, again, all grasses, they don't have as much water, so that's why you're not seeing those trees, so those grasses are going to take over. And then our beautiful, very diverse coral reefs, as long as the coral is healthy, it doesn't change. So here in Ohio, our climax community is going to be our deciduous forest. So you've got your combinations of a lot of different deciduous trees. Your oak hickory forests, which are very, very common around central Ohio. You can have your maple oaks, your ash beeches, whatever, all these forests with these really big old looking trees. That's automatically a climax community. Look out your window. If you see a lot of really big trees, you're in a climax community. So here's another example. Primary succession, you start with your pioneer community of your lichens and mosses. Then over time, your intermediate species start to take over. You've got your tree seedlings. As they grow, then they mature into their climax community. Let's see, how am I